Hello YouTube. Welcome back to another Trainz video with the latest and greatest from Trainz Forge. Hope everybody had an excellent Christmas and a good holiday day. And looks like the folks at Trainz Forge they gave us some really sweet new freeware, and we're going to take a look at one of one of those freeware items, the coolest of the lot, in my opinion. I'm partial to small engines though, so what do we have? What are we looking at? What's new? Here we have the Union Pacific S5 and S6 yard switchers. Now, as I said, I'm partial to small locomotives as it is. I just find little locomotives that have all the personality in the world. But actual dedicated switchers tend to be very overlooked in train simulators across the board. They just really don't garner the attention. They're kind of the unsung heroes of railroading. Without a yard switchers used to be the real big backbone of setting up the train before the train went anywhere, and they still kind of are today. But yeah, even in model railroading, a lot of people tend to kind of overlook these little tiny switchers here for the great big big boys and challengers and whatever. Everybody always thinks of the big road engines, but these little guys really put in the work, and it's nice to see some love given to switchers as of late. Some dedicated switchers, as we saw earlier. Machine Rail pushed out the Baltimore and Ohio 040 for a train simulator, and now we're getting the little UP 060s for trains. So now there are switchers available for trains. They have been for a long time, but that's kind of the issue, is they've been around for a long time. They're kind of one of those models that they were built once and never looked at again. And no hate given to the guy that built them, but we've got the USRA 080s, which are they're a great model. There's some more updated skins and such out there, some kind of updated models, but they're old. They show it. They show their age. They show their show how long ago they were built. They're not quite standing up to the advancements. But that's the common switcher. We really, and of course K&L Trainz has done a couple switchers. I know there's a couple of Canadian National switchers he did, but you really don't see much attention given to them, and we really don't see very many newer models pushed out. And I imagine part of that has to do with their unpopularity. Like I said, a lot of people just tend to overlook them, or they're not their cup of tea. But it's still really nice to see when somebody will take it on themselves to still push one out, because some of us still enjoy them. Some of us still like these little guys. Matter of fact, the huge majority of my my model train collection are smaller locomotives, or road switchers and switchers. I have a lot of fun with them. I enjoy the smaller stuff. Like I said, I feel like they got a lot more character. But here we've got the UP S5s and S6s. Now I've got them in order. S5s. These three models here, S5s, and these other two down here, S6s. Now, I am not big on UP, so I don't know the ins and outs of these locomotives all that much. I really don't know their history too well. I'm a big Texas and Pacific guy. These, excuse me if you guys can hear that. That was a cat getting into things she shouldn't be, but yeah, these really didn't venture too far south to where I'm from, so they've never really caught my attention up until now. Most of what I would have seen would have been Santa Fe switchers and Texas and Pacific, Katy. These big UP switchers really didn't venture too far south. Now there were some. It's not to say there's not any, but to my knowledge, neither the S5 nor S6s ever got as far south as I am, but there was. Now I'm stuck in Pennsylvania freezing, but so I don't really know the history behind them. I really don't entirely know what I'm looking at that's different on each model, but you know, I still figured I'd show them off because, like I said, it's pretty cool. I love getting a new switcher. I love it when they get a little love given to them. So, starting off, we've got the S5s. These three right here, S5s, and we've got. I think I mixed these two up. No, I didn't. I know what I did. So we've got the early S5, the late, and the Omaha S5. Now I'm not entirely sure what the big difference between the Omaha and the early is outside of the green doors, but we'll take a look at that as we get to it. We got those three, and we hop over here, we got the S6, early and late. And then there's a handful of tenders. You got the early tenders, which I've got attached to the early locomotives, and then we've got the late tenders, and I believe an early tender with the actual UP shield on it. So early, late, and shielded. That's the big ones. So let's start things off with the early S5. Pull up my my handy number board here and figure out which one of these. Is it this one? It is. Cool. So right off the bat, I actually do have kind of a cab. The cab is, you know, not that typical placeholder that is all too common in Trainz. For those of you that enjoy a more custom cab, now, as I've said many a time before, I'm not huge on Trainz cabs. They don't do it for me. Operating in the cabin Trainz just doesn't feel quite as natural as some of the other simulators. But there is one for those of you that enjoy it. And it's pretty well done. It's pretty decent. Pretty neat. A little bit of coal. So let's hop through the outside here. Now I don't think there's a clean and weathered version. I think they're all oh well, that's actually looking pretty clean right there, that Omaha model. But yeah, I don't believe there's really a clean or weathered. There's just varying states of weathered. And as is typical, Trainz Forge does a really good job of their weathering overall. You know, these don't look too over the top because these are yard switchers. These locomotives would not have left their yards all that often. These are meant to remain in, like we see here, a huge yard like this, and they would pretty much stay in an area like this, moving cars around to either their industry that may be around or in the yard itself, or breaking up trains to assemble them into road switching trains, so that a different locomotive could take them on down the rails and switch them out with the various industries along the branch or whatever. Or they would assemble trains in the order of where they're going or whatever. But that's typically what these did. These really did not get out on the main line, so they wouldn't have gotten that mainline dirtiness to them. They'd get more of that operational dirtiness to them. So I think Trainz Forge did a pretty decent job here. You know, it's not over the top, but it's enough to make them look used, but not like they've been out on the road getting dust and dirt all over them. So pretty neat. Pretty neat. Look on our headlight here. It's pretty I love the yellow effect. Pretty decent headlight. Let's see. Control, right click, view details. What do we get to fiddle with? We can open our smoke box door. We can open our roof hatch. I can't run through the sliders. I don't. That part I don't care much for, but you can open the engineer and fireman windows. They're just incremental. You can't just move it and, you know, click and drag. It's a click and increment. But windows can be open. Door, as we slowly get there. Door can be open. And then front window. Which will be this little window right up here. And then the wind deflectors can be open. Got a little wind deflector on the back for running in reverse. That's why the tenders look like the way they do. These little slope back tenders like this, so that the engineer can kind of hang out the back, look behind them, and actually see physically where the locomotive's going. Because most road locomotives, they've got a great big tender built for going over the road. You know, they're built for going 100 plus miles. So the engineer really can't see behind those tenders. Well, these locomotives that really wouldn't leave the yard, they're not eating fuel up quite like a road engine would. So there's no need to have that big over the road tender. And these locomotives being in their yard, typically there's refueling services within a major yard. So the these little switchers can go over there, get their fuel and whatever. So there's no need to have a big giant tender thrown onto the back of them. So you get these little slope back tenders designed so that the engineer can actually see out the back of them for reverse operations. So it's much handier for the crews to use. So that's bells and whistles we can fiddle with. Now let's listen to the actual bells and whistles. Pretty decent bell. It is a pull cord bell, not a steam operated bell, so it's got some little pull cord operations going on here. Does it do it inside? Nope. Not a bad whistle. We heard this whistle on the MC1s. But it is a single chime whistle here, but so might be what they were. I don't know. Ah, there, the pumps here. They actually operate. That's neat. I love that little detail. I love it whenever they include that. I don't think we can do anything to the tenders yet, no. This sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good. Pretty good. So let's reverse it back. Now, I will give fair warning. All of the operating sounds across all these locomotives is the same. The whistles do change, but the actual operating sounds don't. So I'm not going to go through and run them all like this. I will go through, you know, the bells, whistles, and such, but I'm not going to run them all up and down the tracks because there's really no reason to. So there's the early. Now let's hop on over to the late. Now right off the bat, the first thing you'll notice is difference about the late. centered headlight. A headlight up on top on the early, centered headlight on the new model, or late, I should say. So, what do we get to fiddle with on the late model? Smoke box door right off the bat. Oh, that's interesting. We're supposed to be stopped here. Hold up. Let me run back over here to this. That's not supposed to be set to 0. Interesting. Well, doesn't actually stop. There it goes. So 0 on the DCC controller thingy here doesn't actually stop the locomotive. You got to click through your controllers, and that'll actually like physically stop it. Otherwise, the wheels will sit here and rotate at a very slow speed. It's kind of weird, but anyway, back to our late. Reset my details here. So, smoke box door, just like the other one. Roof hatch, just like this other one. But we get a whistle shield. That is something that we can add or remove. Whoops, too far. See that right here? So that's pretty neat. Directs the steam for the whistle straight up, out, away from the cab. We can remove that. And then we got a pilot toolbox. It goes right there. Can be removed or placed. So that's pretty neat. And then windows, doors, wind deflectors. So that's the big differences between these two. As far as your options go, you got the whistle shield, pilot toolbox, and then it does have a different whistle model. So we can see this is a multi-chime whistle, as opposed to the early model. It's got a single chime. And we have different pop valves over here, or pressure relief valves, as some would say. Call them pop valves because they pop off and let steam out, but you know, that's just me. Different relief valves. Obviously the headlight, and we have a late tender, which has a fire hose thrown onto the back. Little fire hose housing, and we got marker lights on the late model. Albeit, I don't know if the early model if it's just something that wouldn't have existed on the early model, because I mean you clearly see the brackets right here for marker lights, but the marker lights are installed on the tender of the late model, not actually on the locomotive. That's kind of odd, but it is what it is. The core locomotive is still going to be the same. Like I said, same sounds overall, but it does have a different whistle. Which is not so same whistle, or same bell, different whistle. The whistle's not terrible. The sound file for the early model, though, I think is clearer. This whistle file sounds like it was taken from an old video from a locomotive that is being videoed from a very long distance away, and yeah, it just doesn't translate the best, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Not bad, not bad. What do we got next? We got the Omaha model. Right off the bat, with the Omaha model, you'll notice the bright green doors and windows, and the cleaned up boiler here, cleaned up boiler jacket and cylinder jacket. Those are nice and clean, shiny, unlike these other two. But it's more or less akin to the early model over here. So you still have a high mounted headlight. It is a different headlight model though. So here we got our number boards aren't quite as flared out as we see on the Omaha model here. And then the Omaha model also has the chimed whistle, but the older style relief valves. So chimed whistle, older relief valves. So with the chime whistle model, it gets the same whistle that this locomotive has. And then it's just overall a cleaned up model. Now, if I'm assuming correctly, it's named the Omaha model because the locomotive was based out of Omaha, Nebraska, which is a UP hub. If I was a guessing person, I'm not dead certain. Like I said, I'm not a big UP guy, so I don't know a ton about UP's background or these locomotives. But what do we get to fiddle with this one? We get the roof hatch, smoke box door, windows, doors, deflectors. So this is more or less the same as the early model, just a couple little details up here that are changed up. So that's the S5s, and next we got the S6s. Hop over to the early. Now these are not vastly different locomotives. I imagine that's why we have them all in one go. Again, I don't know all the little minute details and changes and such. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, here's an individual point that's different. I'm just pointing out the differences between the two models in their class. So here's an early S6. Next to it we got the late S6. Same kind of weathered. You know, not too over the board, but enough. It's got that single chime whistle. Now I put the early tender with the shield on it. I like the shield. It looks pretty decent. Judging by how clean that tender is, it probably is meant to go behind the Omaha model, but you know, maybe I'm crazy. I know I'm crazy. We're all crazy. This one does have a different headlight from the rest. So this one has more of a little can here. Doesn't have the number boards on it. So just about all the S5s here, they've got the number boards on their headlights. Even the centered headlight model has a number board on the headlight, but this one has a number board down here and just a regular old can headlight stuck up on top. Still the same bell. And same bells and whistles, same bells and whistles. Nothing to fiddle with on the tender. So there's the early, and last but certainly not least, the late model S6. This one, as you can see, centered headlight, marker lights. And then marker lights, of course, on the late tender, since it's a late locomotive. Chimed whistle, the different relief valves up on top. And is there anything vastly different between these two other than that? Well, tested water pressure stenciled onto our tanks here. That's different. Obviously different number setups. This says Union Pacific. One's got the actual number. And then details. So train class, which will end up flicking on your marker lights to whichever you're running. An extra following would be green. Scheduled be off. Extras will be white. And then a smoke box door can't be opened. Oh, that's cool. I didn't notice that. Let me move up here. See if I can get up close enough for you guys to see it. These little latches here move whenever you open them. That's cool. That's not something massive that everybody had noticed. Like, obviously I overlooked it already once, but that's cool. It's kind of a neat little detail added on. I love little details like that. That's awesome. Smoke box door, roof hatch, and then this is the late model, so you get the whistle shield or the pilot toolbox that can be changed. And we got a little funny. Gives them some eyes. Just for entertainment purposes, he gets some eyes up on the smoke box. That's entertaining. And then windows, doors, deflectors. And then it'll have that chimed whistle sound. Same bell. And yeah. We'll set our switches up here so that we don't slam into anything on the way out. And just kind of roll along here for a little bit. Now, these are not built for high-speed operation. These locomotives would typically, probably, really never get over 15, 20 mile an hour. These are these are yard switchers. Typically, yard speeds are 15 mile an hour. So, but they will pick up and run. In-game, anyway, they'll pick up and run. If that's your desires. We'll stick it to 100 and see what happens. Throw the switch, throw the switch. Throw the switch. And, whoop. Yeah. Oh. 40. 45. Maxed out throttle gets us to 45. Now, one of these locomotives at 45 mile an hour would be entertaining to say the least, especially for the poor crew. So, one of the fun things about a switcher, especially yard switchers, they don't have a pilot or a trailing truck. They have absolutely nothing to guide the locomotive into a corner. So, when these things hit corners, they kind of slam into them. And it'll yank the locomotive around, and it'll cause a lot of shaking and swaying with the locomotives, and they'll kind of herd themselves down the rail, doing side to side motion, kind of like this, doing this number. It's kind of hard to explain in a video, but they'll have a side to side sway, kind of herding themselves down the tracks. So 40, 45 mile an hour, this locomotive would be a rough ride. It'd be a really rough ride. But yeah, these typically never left yards. If they did, it's something like Dallas, where it would have been between yard and yard, 5-6 miles up the tracks to another major yard. So, and you still wouldn't have got really over 15-20 mile an hour. Even then, these are not built for speed. They're built for switching duties. I believe there are 3 or 4 of these locomotives in preservation too. There's a handful of them. As to which ones specifically, S5s or S6, I don't know. I know I've seen a few photos. If I remember correctly, there's one that was operational not too terribly long ago for heritage operations. But pretty sweet. Pretty sweet and pretty smooth. It's kind of cool. It's got most of the little valve gear items animated. Very neat. Very neat. Very, very cool. Excellent work, guys. Like I said, I'm already extremely partial to these tiny little locomotives. They got so much character, in my opinion. Lots of character in these little locomotives. And for trains, you could probably get a pretty good amount of use out of these. So, as you know me, I'm real big on modeling heritage operations. It gives me an excuse to have steam and diesel, a brand new diesel locomotive right next to a steam locomotive and get away with it. So I typically go for heritage operations, and heritage operators, museums. These little switchers are pretty popular, especially the little 040s, because they're the cheapest of steam locomotives. Operationally speaking, they're the cheapest to maintain, cheapest to fuel, and small museums and heritage organizations, they typically don't have a lot of money to fiddle around with, so they gravitate toward these little small tank locomotives and yard switchers, and maybe road switchers, logging style locomotives. They gravitate towards those because they're a lot more financially less straining, as opposed to the big heavy road engines, or even some of the smaller road engines can be very costly. But they still, you still want some steam locomotive operations. That's what, especially today, a lot of kids and grown men, families, everybody loves to see a steam locomotive in operation. That's what really gets people going, is a steam engine. So for a museum, they oftentimes gravitate towards these small little switchers because they can keep up with them and they can operate them kind of on a whim. It's not a turnkey operation, but they're a little more versatile for museum operations. So you can get away with that. Or, if you like yard switching, there's plenty of routes available to trains that have pretty decently large yards for making good use of these little locomotives, or even as AI, switching around in the yards or what have you. But it could be a real fun little model. So go check them out. Go give them a wing around. They're free. You really can't go wrong with free, especially a high quality model like this. Typically free models, they're dated, very dated. It's not often that we get a new model that is up to date with more modern Trainz standards, especially for freeware. So these are free, available at Trainz Forge. Go check them out. The Union Pacific 060 S5s and S6s, available as one pack. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys have a good rest of your holiday week. I believe New Year's is coming up. Have some fun. Probably sit outside and watch the fireworks and have me a beer, I think. Seems like a good idea. So, hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you next time.